So, Charisse, we made it to 30. Episode 30, last one of the year.
You know, it's funny because we made special mention of episode 10. We were like, we made it to 10. And then 20 just kind of slipped us by.
Well, 30 is kind of whatever, too. It's just that it's the last one of the year.
I think that's pretty special. That we're at the end of the year, not that we're at 30. Oh, man.
Should we start the show by going over our personal highlights of 2017?
Of the entire year? I thought you meant of this show.
Okay, fine, this show.
I thought you meant highlights of this show.
Let's narrow it down. I think we've done this before, but for people that haven't tuned in or haven't followed us along from episode 1, how would you describe the first few episodes versus what it is now?
We were definitely still figuring things out. I think figuring out just
give an example.
Our dynamic, but then also the format of the show. Well, like we weren't actually very good at explaining what we were talking about. So we would kind of jump into things. We're slightly better now, but the first 5 episodes, I would say we like really just jumped into our thoughts on topics instead of doing more explanation of what it is. VS now where we also, you can consider part of it as like coverage.
Yeah. The thing that crosses my mind is in the very beginning, I think the argumentative side for the sake of better dialogue, I don't think it was established.
Well, I also just don't think, so 30 weeks ago, that's what, 7 months.
Yeah.
Right.
7.5 months.
I guess we've gotten to know each other over the past 7 months. So the conversation is better. I
wonder how things would have progressed on a, I guess, relationship level if we didn't have this show.
That is an interesting question. We'll never know.
I mean, I would suspect that it'd probably be, not that the relationship's superficial, but it just would probably not be.
It would be
a little bit more drilled down.
Well, yeah, because you have to be intentional even with your friends if you want to talk about deep stuff.
Yeah.
And we're required by the structure of this weekly podcast to sit down and talk to each other for an hour.
Here's a good question. How have you changed because of this podcast?
I've told you this before off air, but my ability to articulate what I'm thinking has improved even when I'm not in front of a mic, and not consciously, but just subconsciously I've gotten better.
You kind of need to think a little bit quicker on your feet.
I said this before, but I'm better at rescuing myself from bad sentences. So I don't start and then stop and restart, but I will save myself halfway through it.
Do you think your articulation is better?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think my thoughts, like the thinking has always been there.
All right. Okay.
I just want to be clear. I didn't suddenly get smarter in 7 months from doing this show, but my ability to explain what I'm thinking about is probably better.
I think I slowed down a lot. So for example, when I was working through certain ideas or thoughts for this, so you see I'm slowing down because I'm picking my words, but for the sake of just everyday life, like there are certain things that you'll encounter, and I would probably just practice a bit more of a similar approach where I just slow down and think about it and be a little bit more deliberate. Whereas maybe in the past I would just sort of ramble through it. So I think overall, I mean, this is our sort of, what's the right word to use? This is hopefully inspiring other people, or just letting them know that it's not that hard to do as long as you try and do it.
Yeah.
If you're willing to like dedicate time and be consistent about it, there's no reason why you won't see a measurable increase in quality. And I mean, at the end of the day, like I didn't intend to do this for the sake of like developing my personal skills or like skills outside of this exact format. But I mean, there's a lot of overlap into other things.
Also, if you want to find out if you can have a better relationship with someone, you should start a podcast with them. It's revealing. I have a Christmas gift for you.
Oh, thank you. Should I open this on air?
Yes. That's why I'm giving it to you right now and not off the mic.
You guys can't see this, but it's wrapped in white paper with a snowflake on it. And it's got the tape that's sealing it is a line of dots.
It's recycled paper.
Nice.
I don't buy wrapping paper.
It feels like a book.
I think it looks like a book too.
Like a book? All right, you know what?
It's okay. You can rip it.
All right. So the book is Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Brian Stevenson. Interesting.
I think that I might have mentioned it on this show before, but I'm not certain.
So let me know why you got me this book.
Okay, so I didn't mean for this to turn into a story, but I went to the bookstore and there were actually 2 other books that I tried to find you that they didn't have, but I'm going to shout them out on the podcast anyway. One is Reset by Ellen Pao, and the other is Negroland by Margot Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And I tried to get you those books because I was actually consciously trying to get you a nonfiction book by a female author and also a female of color author to sort of like expand your reading set. But they didn't have either book. So I settled for this one, which
that's a testament to Hong Kong bookstores.
Yeah. Turned into an interesting, revealing story. But I like Just Mercy a lot because it's about incarceration in the States and specifically about how it affects African-American males. And it's really easy read because it's fascinating. Yeah. So I think you'll like it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also just kind of wanted to get you a gift so I could surprise you on air.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am, I have a little bit of egg on my face. I am without any gifts.
No, it's fine.
Although I like to think that us doing this is my gift to you, right?
Yes, this podcast has actually, I don't know if you've been seeing on Twitter, but a lot of people have been tweeting accomplishments of 2017.
No.
You have not seen this.
I am embarrassed to admit that the Twitter that I am on right now is just not my usual timeline.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah. Anyway, so my Twitter has been journalists tweeting, the best articles or the articles they're the most proud of in 2017, or just projects that you achieved. And it's pretty cool because some things maybe slipped you by, like as a regular reader. And for me, I was thinking, I didn't tweet this, but one of my accomplishments I would definitely rank this year, like in the top 3, is doing this podcast.
Damn.
Yeah.
Try to hold back the tears, Therese. Or if you need to let it out, just let it out.
Well, it's the end of the year, the last episode of 2017, so I feel like we can get sentimental.
Okay, fair enough.
Next year will be all business again.
Sounds good.
No
all right.
more sentiments until the end of 2018.
All right. Oh, on this one last note, this might be the last time that we're in the same room for a month?
Yeah.
Yeah. Charisse is going off to Kyoto to work for a month.
Yeah. So the dynamic may be slightly different because we won't be in front of each other. Just a heads up.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Should we get going for the day?
Yeah, let's do this.
You start it off.
All right.
This is going to require a lot of energy, I think.
I think the topic itself will bring the energy.
Yeah.
You don't even have to summon it because it will just come naturally. Yeah. And the subject that I am talking about
to preface this week, I accidentally forgot to put this in the link list of Tuesday's newsletter. I totally was going to, and I messaged Charisse about it, but I forgot.
Yes. Yeah. So this is coming to you blind in a way because you won't have had a chance to read it, but it's been quite widely spread, I would say. And the subject is so much climax, so much buildup now. The New York Times does an expose on sexual harassment and the toxic boys club culture of Vice Media. So to give a little bit of background information, Vice Media is a North American digital media and broadcasting company originally from Montreal. It is currently valued at $5.7 billion. Vice Media includes a whole bunch of brands beyond Vice, including Viceland, Noisy, Motherboard, Munchies, ID, etc., and even smaller ones. It's currently headquartered in Brooklyn. It was co-founded by Sarush Alvi, Shane Smith, and Gavin McInnes. Currently, Smith and McInnes are still the leads, and it was founded in 1994. Okay, so that's all the background you need about Vice. How would you describe what you read and watch on Vice?
I would say Vice is a youthful take on journalism. And I think that...
Do you say youthful in terms of the way it's written or subject-wise? I
would say both. Okay. I think that it can be more serious like topics, but at the same time, I think their approach is just more relevant. Mm-hmm. Like I think every generation has a different way of being communicated to, and they just so happen to understand how to communicate to a quote-unquote more youthful generation.
On an earlier episode of this show, we talked about the Vice documentary where one of their white female reporters covered the Nazi movement in Charlottesville, I think.
Yes.
And we were saying that was a really good example of good on the spot journalism, like quick thinking. So the expose, what it is the Times covers 4 different settlements that involved sexual harassment and defamation, and they give a lot of details about it. And the Times backs this up. They said they interviewed more than 100 current and former Vice employees. And actually, it's really interesting because there is a substantial part of this expose that says, like, after Vice figured out we were investigating them, then they did XYZ, or then so-and-so came forward. So it was like the Times, I don't know how it starts. The Times maybe gets one lead and they start looking into it. And then, rats coming out of the cupboard, they start to find more dirt. And then Vice is like trying to clean up its act as the Times is working. The
New York Times is a true empowerer, right? I'm sorry. I'd say the New York Times is a true enabler because that is a legitimate publication that's coming forward in support.
Yeah. So what it is, I'm not going to get into the details of the settlements because if you go and read this, it's quite long and they go into, dates and exact numbers and names, etc. But besides that, they talk to just a lot of women and men as well who experienced or witnessed a large range of sexual misconduct at Vice. So it goes from, things that are really clearly inexcusable, like groping women or forcing them to, or asking them to have sex with you, things like that. And then things that are less specific to one incident, which are a culture where you as a female might suspect that your male supervisor is not promoting you because you turned down a kiss at a party, something like that.
Yeah. The 2 things that I wanted to like sort of bring to the table were, and this is not in support of any action so much as I'm curious to hear your opinion, knowing how Vice is sort of respected and people get behind it because there's this edgy version that is telling things that mainstream media may not cover. Would that sort of philosophy and sort of all that be possible if it wasn't always pushing the boundaries? And that is like the interesting thing is because like, I think the way they've gone about approaching their editorial storytelling in some ways is like, just do it, whether or not you agree with their editorial lens. And I think that it's spilled over into the culture, right? So it's like, you could potentially wrangle that back in, but the Vice as we know it today might not be the same Vice.
Yeah, I was thinking about that same subject because Vice is known for and should credit a lot of its success for being provocative. It is famous.
Provocation is good. Yeah,
it's famous from the early days for covering streetwear and drugs and things that traditional media wasn't talking about, right? And I understand that. And I think, and that is appealing to me too, in terms of subject-wise, in terms of content. And I wrestle with that same question because I wouldn't wish for Vice's content to be different. I would hope that you can produce that kind of writing without a workplace that is misogynistic.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that the misogynistic part is probably not. I think that doesn't need to kind of tip into the editorial side. I think that the general looseness of it is probably the bigger picture sort of intersection, right? That the fact that you're going about things and not having hard, strict rules, but that doesn't mean that doesn't condone misogynistic behavior. That's my perspective on it.
I understand.
Yeah.
I don't think it's easy to talk about as well because I see the value in not necessarily always playing by a journalistic playbook, but you still have to be really clear that there are still rules to some things. Mm-hmm. And even though Vice covers a lot of parties, that doesn't mean there should be coworkers at parties then breaking rules of sexual harassment. Yeah. And I know it's like, I'm not making an excuse. Like I see how that conflation happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a kind of an obvious, not so obvious answer. The obvious answers are there, but I'm just curious from your perspective, how would you express the benefit of having a workplace where everyone's on equal footing and you rid yourself of any sort of misogyny?
Actually, first, before I answer that question, in your personal experience, can you see how this culture happened? Like, you are able to have a personal understanding of the vice culture from your own experiences?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely that, where I used to work, I wouldn't say that any of this stuff happened that I know of, right? But it's like, I mean, people hook up at work, et cetera, et cetera. But I would also say that, and this also kind of tips into like another question I was going to ask later, but since we're on that topic, it's like, I can see how when you have, a bunch of people that are young, spending a lot of time together, getting drunk, hanging out outside of work, things are going to happen.
But sometimes I wonder if and it's interesting because I think of myself as very self-aware, and yet I still wonder if me and somehow other young women in media are just all making things up and the men don't understand it. As in, I don't know if you see the reality of the problem, because you cannot possibly have the same experience that I have.
Agreed. Because I'm also not omnipresent. There are things that are going to happen when I'm not around.
Okay. So to go back to your question about what a more egalitarian culture looks like, what the benefits of that is. One key thing that I think women in media struggle with, especially quote unquote edgier publications, provocative publications, is that there is an expectation, if you are female, that you have to be able to play with the boys. You have to be able to get on with that kind of culture. Like, if there's a sexy joke or like a dick joke, like, you have to be able to laugh at that. And I'm not saying that it's not funny 100% of the time, but it's unfair that there's an expectation on the females in the room to play along or to bend their personality in some way in order to fit in. And I think there is a concern as well. Like, you will wonder if you didn't get a promotion or a raise because you are female, because your male supervisor, I don't know, is afraid that he'll come on to you even, or that he flirted with you once and you rejected him, so he feels uncomfortable about it. And you'll wonder, did I not get this story because of that? And it's unclear. You can't know for certain, but there is that feeling. Yeah. What is really damaging is not being able to be certain. I mean, obviously there's the real damaging stuff, like abuse and harassment results in suits and trauma. But overall, the culture is damaging because you will always wonder, did I earn this through merit or did I have to work harder? Yeah. Because I had to battle a sexist XYZ.
Yeah. So even if there aren't any clear indications on the surface of why your success has sort of come about, it still lingers in the back of your mind, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. Because
obviously I could never experience that. So this is the first time I'm sort of hearing it. So even if there is no evidence of tampering, I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but
I think even when there isn't like a clear-cut case, like groping, right? Like no physical advance of some kind, places like Vice are, the woman described it as, there was a good quote I wanted to bring up. Oh, woman at Vice described the culture there as male entitlement and ingrained misogyny. And I think it's not just Vice. And I would even hazard to say like it's the majority of publications, because there is still an imbalance in terms of men and women in leadership positions. And when that's the case, then so long as the power is not evenly split, then the employees will not feel a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
do you agree?
No, I totally agree.
No, just
like
wondering.
I think I don't believe that things should be split for the sake of being split so much as like the merit side, right? So, but I also think that at the same time, the analysis and like the insight into sort of the backing behind choosing people for certain roles is tainted to begin with, right? Yeah. So I'm not about, hey, you know what? Let's just split it right down the middle and, you know, it'll sort itself out. It's more like, hey, let's actually look at the opportunities from a balanced lens. Because I would say that's the issue right now. It's not balanced. Yeah. It skews heavily towards male.
Yeah. I would say
that's my issue.
I would say both in the workplace and also I think coverage itself. The Times expose actually doesn't mention this really, but if I was to go back through Vice features, I'm ready to bet money that the majority of them are male. I just have confidence in that being the case. And then I also wonder if the kinds of women that are featured are as varied as the kinds of men. Mm-hmm. Like I feel a lot of entertainment publications or edgy publications like Vice, they cover a lot of female entertainers, but maybe not a broader scope than that. Mm-hmm. But for men, they might cover, you know, the whole range. Mm-hmm. You know, CEOs, scientists, engineers, entertainers, etc. And that's also a problem. Yeah. When that's your coverage, it affects the kind of employees you attract and then also what your employees feel comfortable in saying and doing.
Mm-hmm. So this was one of the questions that I mentioned off air that I was curious to ask you is there are certain things that happen. Like, I don't think Vice ever anticipated becoming a multi-billion-dollar company. No. I think a lot of things they did in the early days were a byproduct of just the times. You know what I mean? Like if you're a scrappy startup, I'm not even talking about anything on the sexual harassment side, but let's say you did something a little bit unsavory because you needed to pay rent. Okay. Let's say that there was something that happened 12 years ago at a Christmas party. Is someone able to atone for what they did that long ago? Like how would you approach that where like, hey, you know what? Let's say I did something fucked up like, 10 years ago and it still weighs on me. Is there any way I can make it better or I can clear the air, or is it something that's always going to be on my record? And this kind of ties back to, remember the podcast we did a few episodes ago about, was it Skepta? Yeah. Where he was getting hammered for things he said when he was a lot younger. Yeah. Whether it's homophobic, whatever. Like that's what I'm curious to know is like some of these instances come up, half a decade later. Yeah. And I would like to think that who you are when you're 23 versus 33 mm-hmm. versus 43 are different. And like, what happens if nothing happened, from 24 onwards because you smartened up? Yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah. Actually, I didn't say this in my earlier explanation, but Smith and Alvey, co-owners still leading Vice Media, did say in a statement to the Times, this is a quote, "From the top down, we have failed as a company to create a safe and inclusive workplace where everyone, especially women, can feel respected and thrive." So they make an apology. The expose covers it. They went through firings. They eventually did fire the people responsible mm-hmm. in the settlements. They hired a new HR. They hired outside investigation. There's a diversity board now. So they are making, I don't know. I don't work at Vice, so I don't know if this is making a real difference, but they're at least making actions that look like
at least it's better than what it was
to make difference. Pre. Yeah. And it's a start. And did you read the comments on the expose?
No.
You didn't look at?
No.
Okay. So I actually did look at the comments. Well, I looked at the New York Times picks comments. I did not look at all of them, but there was one that has stuck with me because, so it's this man named Walter Rett, and he comments on the language of denial used to cover incidents and events. Mm-hmm. And I think it gets to what you're talking about. He says denial, but it goes, I think what he's addressing is like when people apologize, it's often in these incidents, it's like, I was younger, I didn't know better, I'm a new person now. And I think you are allowed to change, but apologies need to be more specific as well. Like they need to address, especially in these instances, unlike Skepta, which was like a vague comment in general, denigrating a general gay community. If you are specifically hurting individuals, I think you need to come out and say, what I did this time with this woman was wrong. And I need to like.
But doesn't that bring the attention to someone who may not want it either?
I mean, if the attention's already there, you can't get away from it.
Got it.
I'm not saying like, I don't know, it'd be nice if people just came forward and confessed all the things they did. But if people know about the existence of XYZ, then I think you should just address the fact that those things were wrong.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it doesn't matter what, in this case, because it's not individuals necessarily that is the problem, it's a workplace. It comes down to not what they say, but what actions they actually take. Do
you think that CEOs of large companies actually need to be more proactive in seeking out any sort of friction?
Yeah.
So like you think they should develop task force where like, hey, I need to stamp out sexual harassment. So someone needs to be continually on watch.
If you are big enough to have those resources, then I say yes.
Because you think it's going to happen regardless.
They're
you could
valued
have the best
at $5.7 billion.
Yeah.
I think they can spare.
Well, it's less about that. It's more about, do you think that this problem will always be around regardless? You don't think it's going to change?
No.
Okay. I don't really have an opinion on it because I wonder how much of it is ingrained in the culture of the business. But I think that we've also seen that.
I think it's the same as like how there are laws against wage theft because it's just a thing that happens. There should be equal safety measures against sexual harassment because no matter, I think it's naive to think that we are a more modern society, so sexual harassment isn't going to happen. I think it's a human thing when there is power involved. And I honestly, I think it could happen. It could be men or women who are abusing their power in some way. It should be no different from like how there needs to be wage parity, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I guess I'm just trying to see if there's a sliver of good in humanity and that if the culture is strong enough, then it won't happen.
No.
You don't have that sort of belief.
Do you think that it's a problem that you need to be watchful of when you're just starting out?
I think you need to be watchful regardless, but I also think that it requires a certain level of experience, life experience, running a team, management, to be able to identify this.
I wonder if you think about it, because we're a team.
I think
we're a much smaller team, but
I think about it. I think about the one thing I cannot control is maybe the leisure elements of MAEKAN. So like when everyone's just like hanging out and not really.
You had a question you wanted to ask about that, right?
Not really. It was the one that pertained to like going back and figuring. Yeah, like I think the moments that make me question it the most are when people are just like out and about outside of a work setting. And like, I can't really control what's being said. And most of the time it's more on the basis of being a joke. So it's hard for me to differentiate what is like, it's kind of like a comedian, right? When he tells an offensive joke, but it's clearly contextualized as this is comedy, right? So those are the things that for me, like, if it's a work function and it's a work party or whatever, yeah, of course you need to step in. But if it's something that happens where, hey, you know what, let's all get dinner, and then someone says something, what is my role in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to ask you that. How responsible do you feel in that situation? Even though you are at what is ostensibly not a work function, but there are people who you employ present, does that affect how you
I think it should
behave? Yeah.
I think it should.
I think it should too. I was wondering what you were going to say.
But I wonder, am I exerting too much control and power over someone when in reality it's like, all of a sudden I'm controlling your personal life in a way. It's not that easy, right? You're thinking about it. Because that's the thing is like, hey, if you said something offensive and I was like, hey, Shrees, that's not cool. You can't say that. right? But
I think you should.
No, you should say it. But then at the same time, it's like, does that mean I fire you because of it? Like, you know what I mean? You're I guess that's the thing is like, I guess it has proven that people lose their jobs over things they do in the public sphere outside of the workplace because it reflects poorly.
But I think I don't think you fire me over a specific incident out of the office where I do something inadvisable, but it should inform you about the kind of person I am.
Yes.
I don't think, and this is something that I think the Vice expose shows you as well, that you cannot imagine that people are different at a party and different in the workplace. It's the same person.
Generally speaking. But
yes, generally speaking. And yes, you cannot fire someone for something you see them do like on IG stories, but I think it does inform you about the kind of person that you have hired.
Yeah. But what happens if they're super bunned up at work and then on Saturday nights they're getting in bar fights?
I think that should tell you something about who they are.
I'm like policing them outside. I know,
I'm not saying you police them, but I think it should inform what you know about this person. I don't think, like, I'm not suggesting that you take action, but I think you include it in what you know about a person. It's the same thing as like employers now will look at people's social media. Mm-hmm. And I think I said this before, like you should be the person that you are proud of, like on social media and not. So on the flip side, like let's say you are concerned about policing someone's personal life outside of the office, but at the same time, I think seeing an employer stand up for those beliefs outside of the office will carries over into a working environment.
Yeah.
Even, and this is hard because it gives you so much responsibility, but like, let's say a person who doesn't work for MAEKAN does something inadvisable in front of you and you say nothing, and I see that, I don't disconnect that from Eugene in the office. Mm-hmm. I remember the fact that Eugene let XYZ happen in front of him and said nothing. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that straightforward.
It's not.
It translates
because
into...
I'm also judging you for not saying anything. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think it's easy for us to stand back, but in the heat of the moment, I don't know if you necessarily can 100% confirm that you'll make the right decision.
I mean, no, I can't. I can't say that I all the time make the right decision and don't make mistakes. And I always call people out on their shit. But I think to bring it beyond just workplace, but in a generally talking about a culture that is misogynistic, shouldn't you be standing against that stuff anyway, regardless of whether it's in your workplace or not? Like you and me both, shouldn't we be standing up against misogyny, sexual harassment, regardless of whether it's our coworker or employer?
Well, I mean, I don't want to reopen this kind of words, but it really comes down to the context. Because like I said, like, you know, how many times you watched a comedian who is offensive, but you kind of knew it was for his show? I mean, I'm pretty hardline, and there are some jokes that I will not find funny. Yeah. That even from a comedian in a stand-up show, I just don't think that it's a joke worth telling. Got it. So that's where I fall. For you, I would advise you on what you should laugh at and not, because I know you. You would or you wouldn't? I would. See, I draw the line there. I don't think that if it's contextualized appropriately, then I think there is a bit of like a poetic license to just go about it. I think jokes are, this has gone so off of the Vice expose, but I think jokes are harmful too. I find it hard to imagine a joke that's about sexual abuse that critiques culture in a useful way, that is more useful in its critique than it is harmful in being a joke. Is that a good place to wrap it up? I don't know. I actually felt like I was too permissive. Really? I don't feel like I
came down hard enough on this being, there is no way you can cut it where it looks good.
For Vice.
Not to say that they are irredeemable, but I just don't want to come across as they are excusable in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't think I came across strongly enough that this totally exists in more media publications and newsrooms everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know this from my female writer friends who tell me this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I don't know what the purpose is in me emphasizing the fact that it is prevalent, other than to, I guess, in solidarity of my female listeners who write in newsrooms where they've experienced toxic cultures. Anything else you want to add? Actually, you were the person who wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, I was just interested to hear your perspective on it. And I was just curious to know what are the things in place, like systemically, how to ensure this doesn't happen. Maybe not so much happen, but how does it not derail sort of the good things that can come about, a newsroom or a media organization?
I think what concerns me is the connection we make between provocative content and male culture, and stereotypically male culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to fix that.
I think that if you look at the trajectory of Vice, like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that Vice has done that's been controversial from the very early days. Sometimes it is difficult to fix that when that is in many ways a marker of your success.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like it might be paradoxical because that's your success, but that could also be your downfall.
Yeah. I guess
you don't seem that satisfied.
I don't. I feel dissatisfied with the conversation, but I don't know exactly what it is I feel dissatisfied about. What do you want to do to be more inclusive at MAEKAN? To be aware of...
I think that the thing that comes across as being the most important is just having the ability to tell more diverse stories.
Mm.
And I think the newsroom currently, actually, I would say it's not that skewed towards male. It's starting to balance out a bit more.
What do you mean? Like
just the types of editors and like writers that we're bringing in to the mix. Like, I would say it's definitely not 50-50, but I think it's starting to balance out a bit more.
I mean more just like in general in terms of principles. But you did mention coverage, which I think is one thing.
The principles are hard to explain because I don't go about and think about, you know what? I'm gonna make sure I hit these 5 things on my principle checklist. It's just there. It's a thing that is subconscious, right? It's like, don't judge people based on, it's kind of like provide opportunity based on merit. And if that generally trumps a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's already very, very much a foundational element, then I don't think you really need to specify. So my topic today is a bit of a retrospective. It's a video with John C.J. by Fast Company, and it's actually from 2011. When I was watching it, I didn't know it was from, almost 7 years ago. And as I was listening to him talk, I was like, this is all very relevant. This is so on point. And then It's only after the fact that I realized that it was, almost 10 years ago, And the thing that's most enlightening about what he said was just the need for people to go out and exit their comfort zones.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of is so relevant now when we're stuck in these filter bubbles. And I'm going to play a little bit of a snippet right now and you guys can get a better understanding.
The greatest thing that we can offer is to be great listeners and to have empathy for your culture, to understand what is the truth. And so Many times people will say, what did you do for your longtime clients? Basically, what we did was listen carefully, understood and be empathetic to the truth of who they are, to understand their soul, understood their soul, and then make that soul relevant to a greater number of people. One of the great challenges for all of us, not just creative people, is to put yourself into unusual situations, put yourself into unusual cultures where you don't belong, to put yourself amongst people who you don't normally hang out with, or out of your comfort zone culturally. And I think that's very, very important.
The concept and notion behind it is not complex. It's like, hey, we fall into these repeatable patterns every day, especially when things become too convenient, right? And I think that he really sort of enlightened the need for you to just go and try out new things, to put yourself in new environments and opportunities. And it's interesting because this was in many ways a precursor, like a foreshadowing to what is sort of rampant now, where we're stuck in these places where we're all thinking the same, where we're interacting with the same people. We have these communities online. And I think that to me was one of the things that reinforced the fact that I personally need to go and step out and like put myself into new situations, things that I don't even want to do, right? Like maybe I should just go do it because I have this preconceived notion I won't like it. But then I should probably find value in the fact that it's a new experience, because the new experience, in many ways, there's no barometer or measuring stick to success in a new experience, right? And I think this is like maybe for 2017, it's a bit of a retrospective theme. Step back, just do things that either you're not good at or you've never experienced. And I feel like I've been burnt before, where I've done so much reading, so much research into something and felt as though I knew a lot about it, but never actually put my foot onto the pavement and experienced it firsthand. Sharice is typing away.
You just reminded me of, you just reminded me of this great metaphor I once read on this topic of expertise and knowledge. And I've completely forgotten who the author is. So it's not very helpful. Can you paraphrase it? Yes, and paraphrase it. She said it was like experts live on different islands. So in this case, the metaphor is islands instead of bubbles or silos, right? But like experts live on different islands. And when you are someone who wants to know a little bit about a lot of things, you are a swimmer between these islands, and you're never going to be native, but you have to be content with the amount of knowledge you have. And the inhabitants of those islands, they're going to know that you're not native. And you can't hope, like you're saying, you can't hope to read so much about something or hang out so much with a group that, you blend into seamlessly into that group, but you can be content visiting.
Yeah. When you look at your overall skill set, you know what you're weak at, right?
Yeah.
How active are you at trying to improve your weaknesses versus doubling down on your strengths?
Better now. 2017, I actually did stretch myself more in terms of skills to try more things and to not just take on the jobs that I know I'm good at. I think the scary thing for me is that I feel really good at doing things well. I think this is natural, right? Like I feel good in succeeding at things. And when you try something new, you're not guaranteed success.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I've tried not to lose sight of as I get older, I guess, is just always have that grit and determination. Like if you can't figure something out, like I think that's the beginning and the end. If something that you used to have, maybe when you're younger, you had more energy and you're willing to like just grind it out and figure out a solution. Like I never want to lose sight of that.
So he talks about what we've been talking about in terms of knowledge and expertise and
empathy
how,
and like,
that's the part that gets me more, that makes me feel like I'm not good at doing this, is I'm not good at putting myself amongst people who I don't agree with. And I don't think I spend enough time trying to understand those people. Yeah.
Do you worry that you might find a sliver of something and you'll you'll soften up to their stance that you feel so adamant against? Because I think I used to feel that way.
I would like to say that I am not afraid to change my opinion on something.
Yeah.
That I am not so stubborn that I can't change my mind. But I think the reason why I don't go hang out with people that I think I disagree with is I just find it unpleasant. Mm-hmm. And I would have to overcome my expectation that this is going to be unpleasant in the hopes that I might learn something more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the best examples are looking back at everything that's transpired in the last year or so. You look at a lot of negative situations and a lot of movements that have kind of been born out of various circumstances, and understanding why they think that way. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's white supremacy or whatever, and like nationalism, like why does that exist? And doesn't mean that you have to accept it. It's just like you understand why, and maybe that is the root of the issue that you should maybe gravitate more towards.
But I think what I do, my tactic towards these subjects that I think I disagree with the other side is that I read books and material on those subjects, but they tend to be written by people I agree with. Does that make sense?
No.
That's what I do. Yeah. Even when I'm trying to learn about this subject, I'm reading material that was written by someone who I am most likely to agree with, rather than actually going to the source.
And you know how I tried to combat that, and I don't know if it worked or not, was just following a plethora of people on Twitter that represented the full range of opinion. I'm sure most readers are probably more on the liberal side, but I just am never that confident with right-wing news.
Yeah.
Because there might be an element of deception there.
Yep.
So as much as I follow it, like I could read something that's very compelling, but if the facts at the very core are wrong or they're manipulated, like that's kind of, I throw a little shade on that.
Yeah.
But I'm open to it. I don't really have much to add to that. I think the video in itself is so thoughtful and well done in terms of what's communicated that I just highly suggest you guys go and watch it. It's worth your 3 minutes. And it's just kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but prophetic in the sense that like everything he said is like so relevant now.
Yeah.
And this was literally almost a decade ago. I'm sure that in many ways, 2011, I don't think the algorithm element was so strong. I think about it, I'm like, there are certain value systems that regardless of where we are in the world and what time and place are still relevant and valid. And I think that's what's kind of interesting.
Yes, society is worse today in terms of filter bubbles, but I also think that it's probably just a very human thing in terms of comfort. For community. Yeah.
I would argue that comfort isn't the thing you should always seek.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I just mean that I think it's a human thing that we wind up doing it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that caps off episode 30.
Conveniently also the last of 2017.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to us. If you would like to hear more about MAEKAN and our membership opportunities, which include exclusive stories, a members-only Slack community, you can check us out at maekan.com. There you can also listen and read to more of our stories that are focused on the sights and sounds of creative culture.
You can also subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and platforms. If you're hearing this is obviously on the MAEKAN It Up feed. So if you're going to hopefully pass it along to friends and family, please let them know to subscribe to both feeds. And if you like this podcast, do us a huge favor and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, we haven't said this in a while, but Eugene and I are open to being questioned and challenged. So you can hit us up at Charisse@maekan.com and Eugene@maekan.com.
One thing too, I don't know if that many people are familiar, but we have an illustration that we contribute to every episode. And I think it's only available in one format, and that's if it's on like the Libsyn, which is the hosting for our podcast.
Oh,
it's
really?
The only place I don't think anyone else can see it anywhere else.
No, we gotta fix that.
Yeah, maybe when we share this on wherever, we should just put it up.
Okay.
Well, I'm Eugene.
I'm Charisse.
And this is MAEKAN It Up.
Good ending.